check in now with my colleague Mike Seidel, who is in just west of Lafayette. Right now, the name of the town skips me, Mike. Scott, Louisiana. But you too will be dealing with pretty bad weather from now, probably until well after midnight.
Yeah, certainly for the next 5 or 6 hours. We're getting some pretty heavy rain right now. We've gusted up in the low 30s. They're not as windy as where you are. We're 35 miles from Jennings and 70 miles from Lake Charles. So Paul is midway between Lake Charles and Jennings, Lake Charles and here just on the west side of Lafayette. Now, what you want to remember is the center is going to go into our west and far enough away that we likely will not get hurricane force winds here. We may get hurricane force gusts, and that's going to knock out power. Keep in mind, with Laura here, they were far enough away from the center when it ravaged Lake Charles and Cameron and Calcasieu parishes that they have some power outages here and just some trees down. This is Interstate 90. Good to see not a whole lot of traffic out there today versus yesterday. We've got some cars, a lot of big rigs, and it's one of those days where you got to slow down. There's a lot of ponding on the roadway with this heavy rain. We've had this one squall come on through. You can see that on the radar, and then looking to our south and southwest towards the center, you can see we have a little bit of a drying trend coming in, and then we'll have more bands wrapping in this afternoon and this evening. Now, once the center goes north of I-10, which is our latitude, we'll start to see the rain back off here because this storm is front-end loaded with rainfall. Many times this year we've seen everything on the east side or northeast side, but this is really north of the latitude of the center. So it goes north of us, say about 8 o'clock tonight Eastern, 7 here in the central time zone. And after that, the rain should abate quite a bit, but we're still going to have the wind, and once it goes by, we'll get those southwest winds, and peak gusts could still be upwards of 40 or 50 miles an hour. So it's going to be pretty tough here the next 5 or 6 hours. Once we get the delta circulation past us, then we'll get the southwest winds and the drying effect. The weekend looks fine and good for any cleanup we may have to do right here. Speaking of cleanup, they're still doing that in Lake Charles. Tevin Wooten, you were there for Laura when they had the wind gust upwards of 135 miles an hour. Fortunately, it's not going to be that windy, but the damage has been done. You've got all the blue tarps. You've got the wind that may take the tarps off the roof. What else can you tell us about Lake Charles right now?
Well, Mike, this is sort of that insult to injury.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Scott, Louisiana. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel. We're following the movement of Hurricane Delta. It's going to make landfall in the next few hours along the coast, and it's going to come in and pass between Cameron and Jennings. Jennings is about 35 miles off to my west, and we're just off to the east of Lafayette, or we're just off to the west of Lafayette. Let's bring in the police chief, Chad Lazy, from here in Scott, and tell us a little bit about the status of the town right now and what you're looking at in the next few hours.
Things are going great for us right now. We're starting to see the rain bands coming through, a little bit of wind.
We're very fortunate that we haven't had much rain in the last several weeks or days, so the grounds aren't saturated, so hopefully the trees won't go down as quick with the winds that are facing us soon. So we're looking forward to a safe event.
Tell us a little bit about what you went through with Laura, because you were so far east of the center.
Laura, the way it's looking right now, we're facing the same thing we had for Laura. A little bit of winds. I think the fastest wind we saw was 60 miles per hour, and that was a gust. We had minimal rains, and we had proper drainage, so we didn't have any homes that were flooded in our city. So it was good. It was a great day.
We're already seeing some flooding here in the parking lot. Not terribly deep, but we've only had about an inch of rain, and we are under a flash flood warning here till 7 tonight.
Yes. We are seeing some of our spots that are typical for holding a little bit of water like this right here, but it's going to move along very quickly.
So you'll just ride it out and see how things turn out later on this evening.
Everyone's safe, and our police and firefighters are out there making sure everybody's safe and monitoring the wind gusts. That's our biggest problem right now that we're looking at is the winds and see what kind of damage they're going to bring us.
Yeah, and I can see that just about everything in town, I think except the Waffle House, is closed.
Yeah, all of our businesses pretty much shut down at noon today. We had a curfew that went into effect at 4 o'clock today in Lafayette Parish, so our businesses respected that part and closed down at noon.
Okay, Chief Chad Lazy from the Police Department here in Scott, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
We'll hopefully get through this okay. Again, the concern here is wind and power outages. There will be some rain. Again, the flash flood warning goes until 7. We've already had 1 to 2 inches of rain in the area. We could see another 1 to 2 inches. Still think that the heaviest rainfall totals, the 6 to 10, are going to stay off to our west, towards Jennings and towards Lafayette. That's not to say we may not get a few more inches of rain. You can see what happens when it collects here in the parking lot when you get about an inch of rain in 1 hour. Peak gusts so far, 32 miles an hour. We could get gusts here 50 or 60 miles an hour. And as the chief just said, they had a 60-mile-an-hour gust with Laura, and they had minimal impact as far as trees coming down and power outages. And we talked to the locals yesterday, and the power was out. One gentleman said 6 hours. Some of the people said 24 hours. So it was a lot better here by far than Lake Charles. Let's go back to Atlanta. Jackie Jarris, as we track the center. It's closing in on the coast.
Yeah. Fortunately,
it's not a Cat 4 like Laura. It's down to a Cat 2, and it continues to slowly weaken, not to take away the impacts we're going to feel nonetheless.
So I think it's safe to say that people got the message here that they needed to get out of Dodge and out of harm's way. Mike?
Hey, Tevin, right here in Scott. We are off to your east by about an hour. And again, we're getting the showers and a lot of wind now. They're gusting upwards of 30 to 35 miles an hour. Certainly not enough wind yet to knock down trees and knock out power. But you can see on the radar what's coming our way, that EYEWALL now coming on shore. It won't be long before we have the official statement from the Hurricane Center that we have seen our 4th landfall in Louisiana and a record-setting 10th landfalling tropical storm or hurricane. This will be our 5th hurricane of the season along the U.S. coastline. Just incredible. But look at all the standing water out of here. This is one of the impacts we're going to see across Louisiana. 4, 5, 6 inches of rain. Some areas may see more rain. Now a pretty good wind gust. And it's going to be like this for about another 3 to 4 hours. The rain's going to end pretty quickly because everything is basically along and ahead of the circulation. And then once it goes by, once it goes north of I-10, we're going to see the rain wind down, but then we're going to have the winds come around from the backside from the southwest. So it's going to be still very windy in this part of the state and across the whole state. And in I-10 area, from Lake Charles over to Lafayette, those southwest winds could gust later on this evening upwards of 30, 40, maybe even 50 miles an hour. So even though the rain will end and the storm will go by and continue to weaken, we'll still have some gusty winds. Let's go back to Carl Parker in the studio. And Carl, we're awaiting the advisory coming up. Not long away here in a few minutes. Maybe you have it right now. You can give us the latest from the Hurricane Center, see if they've knocked those winds back once again.
Yeah, I believe so, Mike. Certainly that's been the trend for several.
Go to Mike Seidel. He's in Scott, Louisiana. Mike, tell us what are you seeing, what are you hearing?
Yeah, we're getting the same thing here, not as heavy, though, based on your description of the visibility. Very heavy rain. This is the strongest squall we've taken. Winds gusting now 30 to 35 miles an hour. And this is one of the byproducts of all the rain. We've seen over 2 inches so far in the past 3 hours. A lot of standing water in the parking lots. And you can imagine how bad it is out on I-10 here. Right now, we're looking westbound. We're about an hour's drive on a good day from where Tevin is over in Lake Charles. So a lot of standing water. The winds occasionally gusting 30, 35 miles an hour, but that's been the worst of it so far. So power outages, at least here in Lafayette Parish, no reports so far. You can see the wind. We do have some semis out on the roadway, but by and large, there's not a whole lot of traffic on the interstate. That's a good thing, because right now we have flash flood warnings that extend from Lafayette all the way over to Beaumont, Port Arthur. By the way, Beaumont has gusted to 64 miles an hour. They had sustained winds of 39. That's tropical storm force. But back to the interstate, I-10 from Beaumont to Lafayette, that's about 135 miles. That entire stretch is under a flash flood warning, in some spots till at least 7 o'clock. And as we've been telling you, this is very front side loaded. So once the center goes north of your latitude, the rain is going to cut off pretty quickly, and there's not going to be a whole lot of rain on the backside. But with that said, we're going to have totals in excess of 5 to 6 inches, and that's why we have these flash flood watches in this area of Louisiana until tomorrow morning. Now, let's head about 15 miles literally due east of us, right on I-10 to Breaux Bridge. Meteorologist Jim Cantori over there. Jim, the rain hits here, and then it moves right over to your backyard.
Yeah, and you know, we're getting the rain like you are as well, Mike. So you know,
I want to go off to my east and check in with Mike Seidel, who is in Scott, Louisiana, near the Lafayette area. And you know, Mike, I know that you had a little bit of flooding earlier. Do you think that was just from rainfall rates, or was there maybe even a drain clog, which sometimes causes so much flooding?
That's a good question. I think it's rainfall rates, because I'm looking over here behind these trees, and we've got about 5 to 6 inches of water in the field here. I walked off towards I-90. There's a lot of standing water. So we've had over 2 inches of rain, and the winds have been gusting about 35, maybe 40 miles an hour. What we're waiting for is that band. It's really part of what's left of the eyewall, or the eyewall, and that's going to sweep up this way through Abbeville and up here across Lafayette County. It'll hit here, and it'll hit Jim over in Breaux Bridge, and that'll bring us the strongest winds of the hurricane. With that said, last time with Laura, they peaked out at 60 miles an hour. They had minimal damage and a few power outages, nothing widespread, nothing more than, based on what we talked to with the locals, that lasted more than 24 hours. And we're hoping that it's no worse this time. This storm is weaker, although the center is going to be coming closer. So we're going to keep an eye on that band coming up from the south and west, coming right up from the coastline through those southern parishes over towards Vermilion Bay, right up towards Lafayette, where we are here in Scott. Let's go over to Jim Cantori. He is about 15 miles off to our east on the other side of Lafayette. And Jim, I know you're watching the same thing on the radar.
yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Mike, let's call that radar up. Let's just do this right now so everybody can see.
And check in with Mike Seidel. And Mike, we're starting to see conditions deteriorate where we are. Have you seen any changes in the last, let's say, 20 to 30 minutes?
We have indeed, Stephanie. In fact, that same northern eyewall extends over to the south of us and extends down towards New Iberia. They've gusted to 60 miles an hour, and they're southwest of Lafayette. We're just on the west side of Lafayette. We're about 35 miles due east of where Stephanie is in Jennings. So the wind's now blowing parallel to I-10, east to west. Lake Charles about an hour that way. We're getting rainfall not as heavy as we've seen. We've already had 2 to 3 inches of rainfall. Mentioned earlier, flash flood warnings from Lafayette stretching to Beaumont, Port Arthur in Texas. We have very little traffic on the highway. That's good tonight. Everything here is closed. Now the concern is when that band comes in, as Stephanie mentioned, the worst of the weather, and that's where we're going to see the worst of the weather here in Lafayette Parish. By the way, now, about 65,000 customers in Louisiana have lost power, about 115 when you throw in Texas. Those numbers are gradually coming up. We don't expect the numbers we had with Laura, because we're not going to have those kind of winds, but still, you got 70, 80 mile an hour wind gusts with a wet ground. You're going to have uprooted trees and power going out. Water standing all over the place. We're expecting another maybe inch of rain or so when that band comes through, and then the rain will pretty much wind down for the evening. Once the center goes north of 10, our winds will come around to the southwest. It will be a very windy night here in Louisiana, although the strongest winds will move on because they usually come down with the squalls, those tropical squalls. So, Stephanie, we're watching the same line that you're watching. You're going to be more in the meat of it. You should get stronger wind gusts. So far here, we've gusted to 48 miles an hour. Last time with Laura, 60 was a peak gust. So we're hoping that we don't do any higher than that, because with that last time, we didn't have a whole lot of power outages. Stephanie, back to you down the road in Jennings.
Let's go down the road now to Cameron Parish, which